I'm Agent Morris with the NSA.
We have identified some very, very interesting anomalous type of aircraft.
Traffic is quite luminous and is exhibiting some non-ballistic motion. Over.
Move very rapidly at any speed or whether any direction it wanted to go. Fly could change and go to the right or the left or go crossways without hesitating a bit.
What do you think it was?
Well, if they call it a flying saucer, that's what it is.
EWA 517, do you want to report a UFO? Over. Negative. We don't want to report.
Look, it wasn't my worst Wednesday night.
Good evening, everybody. This is Smiles Lewis. Welcome to another live edition of Anomaly-NOW, straight out of Austin, Texas. This is the weekly live news radio roundup. Well, for the audio podcast listeners, it's radio-esque, right? All right, so the Anomaly Archives is a 501c3 nonprofit based out of Austin, Texas. It's also known as the Scientific Anomaly Institute, and we are dedicated to the preservation of anomalistic material of all varieties, whether it be witness testimony or scientific research, data, etc., or popular literature on these subjects. Last week, I alluded to the subject of cryptozoology, and we're going to be talking a little bit about that tonight, very briefly, as we launch into tonight's news roundup, radio roundup. So you can go to our website, AnomalyArchives.org, to find out more about us. You can find links to our newsletter as well as past content. In fact, we just posted newest newsletter a few days ago. And you can find links to where you can subscribe to that via MailChimp, or you can just subscribe via the website, or just come to the website and look for the latest issues. Meanwhile, over at our Flipboard, our aggregator, where we collect all the anomalistic news fit for print, there are a ton of interesting articles, some we won't get to tonight, but that are worth your time and attention, including this Atlantic article, "The Owls Are Not What They Seem." Any Twin Peaks fans out there? I bet there are. It's an interesting article that I think that might be the one that might even quote Mike Cleland of UFO owl infamy. So some of the other things. The big news, of course, is this Loch Ness Monster hunt. Monster enthusiasts gear up for biggest search in 50 years using drones and acoustic equipment. Hundreds of volunteers from around the world take part in the surface watch. This happened this past weekend. It was a massive attempt using a lot more people and a lot more technology than has been utilized before to bring to bear attention on the loch, the deepest lake in the world, or so I've been told recently. And the good old-fashioned cryptid known as Nessie, good old Loch Ness lake monster Nessie. So I haven't seen the surprising definitive news yet, so I kind of suspect they didn't find it. But hey, at least it's getting some more attention. I'm sure the local tourism board is excited for all the global attention, bringing hopefully more folks to the loch and surrounding environs and money into the coffers of the local business people, which, legend tripping, as it's called sometimes, and just this idea of capitalizing on folklore, I think can be a good thing, but like all things, it can get out of control. But here's another one over at the previous article was The Guardian. This is NBCnews.com, largest Loch Ness hunt in 50 years, inside the largest Loch Ness Monster hunt in decades, hundreds of enthusiasts, yada, yada, yada. But this one's got a few more pictures and information including pictures of some of the researchers. And this is the Alan McKenna, the head of Loch Ness Exploration. Apparently there is a Loch Ness Center that has been renovated and is now ready to accept the masses of tourists that are undoubtedly on their way now. So the article quotes Alba's father, Malcolm Begg, 47, a pharmaceutical company employee, had his own remarkably specific ideas about the monster. Quote, I think it's like a Diplodocus with fins, he said, referring to a Jurassic-era dinosaur, while lamenting that most images of the monster have been too grainy to discern a definitive shape. This, growing up, this is, again, one of the things that, like, all the cryptid books I grew up reading were about Bigfoot or Loch Ness Monster or other famous lake monsters from around the world. Very much a fan of this kind of local folklore of monsters and creatures. But and I, my ideas and about the nature of these phenomena, whether they are just misidentified normal creatures, as some suggest, I think the most commonly accepted possibility are large eels of some sort that are perhaps the source of so many of the sightings of the creature in the loch. There are other ideas. Hey, there's somebody we recognize. Good old Gerhard, an American author who's written books about Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster, among others, joins the search for the Loch Ness Monster. Wow, I didn't realize he was over there for this. This is great. The article goes on to say, beyond the shaky photographic quote-unquote proof, believers' primary argument in favor of Nessie's existence is that the lake's immense size and dark, peaty waters make it possible to rule out the existence of even a large creature. Meanwhile, over on good old FB, we have our friend Ken posting here about just returned from the great 2023 Loch Ness expedition. What an honor to be the first researcher ever to fly a thermal drone over the loch. We did this at night in order to test my hypothesis that Nessie is warm-blooded and perhaps also surfaces more frequently at night. My journey will be featured in an upcoming special of the series Weird Britain. More photos to come. Well, cheers to you, Ken. That's awesome. I love, that's the other aspect of being a cryptozoologist is world travel, right? Getting to go to exotic locations and look for strange creatures that might eat or kill you. I guess, you could live being eaten a little bit, right? Oh, wait, did I not? I did not flip over here. Yes, sorry. Here's the Facebook post. There's Ken, where I was reading from, quoting. Meanwhile, a skeptic over on the same Facebook, Mr. William Bratton, not sure I'm familiar, says, to no one's surprise, the, quote, largest hunt in decades for the Loch Ness Monster found absolutely nothing. Doesn't matter how exhaustive your search is, nor the around, quote-unquote, 200 people, drones, boats, and other technology used. In a loch with no monster in it, no matter how exhaustive you are, you can't find a monster in it because it objectively doesn't exist. As has been reaffirmed over and over again by the 2019 eDNA study, 1962 Cambridge University 4-fleet sonar sweep of the entire loch, exhaustive sonar trawling carried out by the University of Birmingham in 1968-70, 1987's exhaustive Operation Deep Scan headed by Adrian Shine that coordinated sonar sweeps across the entire loch end to end with 24 boats, lack of top-down control in the environment that would infer an apex predator, and a 2003 walk across the floor of the loch in its entirety by diver Lloyd Scott. We're at the point with tech and science that we can solve cryptid cases. That's certainly been the case of Loch Ness, and the sooner cryptozoological enthusiasts stop beating this dead horse, the better. A little skeptical, are we? Well, moving right along, over on Coast to Coast, Tim Banal reports on a video that, of course, came out a day or so ago. Watch intriguing anomaly film during weekend's search for Loch Ness Monster. I haven't had a chance to watch the video, but I suspect it's not too definitive, as so much of this isn't. But one of the other things that I mentioned last week when I was going on a brief divergence about the nature of cryptozoology and the many things that it encompasses was the idea of out-of-place animals that are seen in places where they're not expected to be seen. And sure enough, there's always no short supply of those. The Idaho ABC4.com website reports salmon shark suddenly appears on the shore of Salmon River in Idaho. This is posted August 25th. isn't exactly known for its sharks, which makes the sudden appearance of a salmon shark on the shores of the Salmon River even more surprising. Last week, the Idaho Department of Fish and Game said calls and emails came pouring in reporting a shark had washed up on the shores of the Salmon River. Upon an investigation, Clearwater Region Fisheries Manager Joe DuPont said it sure looks like a shark in a post about the discovery, but he is puzzled by how it got there. Yeah. How does it get there? Well, they suspect somebody dropped it there as a joke. Given that the Salmon River isn't a native habitat for the salmon shark, DuPont said the community has nothing to worry about as there are no sharks swimming around Idaho. As for how the salmon shark found its way into central Idaho, DuPont thinks it had a little bit of human help. Quote, I think it is safe to assume that somebody dropped this one on the shore for a good laugh. I certainly have laughed about it, said DuPont. This would have been a great April Fool's joke. Now, everybody's laughing except the poor shark. Meanwhile, it ends with DuPont told ABC4 the salmon shark has been shipped to a marine biologist in Washington for an autopsy. The report of that autopsy will not be available until October at the earliest. Meanwhile, over in Florida, weird monkey sightings spread across Florida. City cops say, I knew I wasn't crazy, quote unquote. Updated August 24th. This is interesting in that it does actually reference a bit of history that I was aware of. And again, this case of out-of-place animals has a known prosaic explanation, sort of, at least. Perhaps. So, strange things occasionally happen at fast food joints, but a large monkey has been seen hanging out at a fried chicken restaurant in Florida. The sighting happened at around 9 a.m. on Wednesday, August 23rd in Orange City, and Popeye crew manager Kimberly Villalobos got multiple photos, which you can see at the link, miamiherald.com. Orange City is about 30 miles north of Orlando. There's some of the pictures there. Her report was soon joined by other sightings, raising concerns there might be multiple monkeys roaming the city. Scrolling down further, Orange City police officials got wind of the drama, and they suspect the monkey or monkeys may be members of a little-known wild primate population in Florida. That population isn't known to live near Orange City, but Florida's alligators, pythons, bears, and crocodiles are notorious for showing up in unexpected places. Quote, the Orange City Police Department had received multiple calls for service reference monkey sightings within the city, police wrote in an August 23rd Facebook post. The monkey seen on the social media has been identified as a wild rhesus macaque monkey. Please do not feed or attempt to capture these monkeys. So this goes back. A wild population of rhesus macaques monkeys were first documented along Florida's Silver River in the 1930s when, quote, a commercial riverboat captain released a half dozen on an island to boost tourism. University of Florida researchers say, turns out the monkeys are great swimmers and didn't stay on the island. This is the problem with invasive species, folks. And to quote Bloomberg, life will find a way, right? Quote unquote. In 2015, it was estimated there were approximately 175 rhesus macaques among 5 groups in Silver Spring State Park, and the population was growing, researchers said. Meanwhile, in UFO news, let's see if we can get this going here. Did you recently know it was Stan Friedman Day? You know, Stan, the nuclear physicist who was so into UFOs that he toured probably more universities, giving more or less the same lecture for decades.
Casts of extraterrestrials and models of flying saucers may not be what one expects to find inside a museum. But that's exactly what one will find tucked inside the Fredericton Region Museum in an exhibit dedicated to the life and work of world-renowned ufologist Stanton Friedman. Museum Board President Hal Scarrup says it's a tribute to Friedman and others who believe.
This exhibit, you're not going to find anything here that is making fun of people who saw what they think are UFOs and aliens. It is to honor his work, and I hope that is evident when you come to see it.
August 27th is Stanton Friedman Day in Fredericton, the city Friedman called home from the 1980s until his death in 2019. To mark Stanton Friedman Day, the museum offered special activities like an alien autopsy. The activities and exhibit may just inspire a new generation of ufologists.
I think the aliens are real.
You can watch the rest of that over at globalnews.ca. And we'll, of course, put the link in the show notes. Some of you might recall that during our Streamathon in 2020, we played a video from the archives up in Canada, in New Brunswick, where Stan Friedman's archives have ended up. Great information in that video. Ooh, it's Building 23. Stan Friedman Archives update from the Provincial Archives of New Brunswick. You can find that over at the Anomaly Archives YouTube channel. I'll try to put the link in there too. It's about 26 minutes long, and they show where the archives are stored. They show some samples from the archive, from the material, and talk about the processing of it. Very interesting stuff, at least for me, as somebody who's obviously interested in the preservation of such materials. And speaking of the preservation of such materials and making them more widely available, Isaac Coy, the pseudonym of a barrister over in England, who's been for some time now actively getting permission to digitize, to scan, and make digital copies available for perusal by folks across the globe, on behalf of the Archives for UFO Research in Sweden, has done a number of recent posted books featuring the works of one of my favorite researchers, and certainly one of my favorite British researchers, Jenny Randles. And over at his blog, isaaccoyup.blogspot.com, are some articles about this back on August 23rd, best UFO book in the last 50 years, PDF of the UFOs That Never Were. He says is arguably the best UFO book published in the last 50 years. That's a pretty tall order, but and I just remember when I brought this book to the attention of our local Austin MUFON group way back in the day. Man, there was some pushback from at least one member there who just took really great offense and was just like, how dare this researcher write off so many people's sightings with such a book? And of course, they hadn't read it. And I tried to explain to them that, no, this is really about just pointing out that, again, the accepted facts that 80+% of all quote unquote UFO sightings turn out to be IFOs, identifiable flying objects. But yeah, you can find a copy of the PDF version of this book that's co-written also by Andy Roberts and David Clark with Jenny Randles, The UFOs That Never Were. And also, day or two later, same website, Isaac Coy, PDF, posted for book UFO Reality by Jenny Randles, which contains the use of the phrase Oz Factor for the first time, and also uses the acronym UAP fairly frequently. Isaac writes, one of the UK's leading UFO researchers, Jenny Randles, has kindly given me permission to upload a searchable scanned copy of her book, UFO Reality from 1983. I've added to the books folder in the online archive hosted by the AFU. Anyone looking for a balanced introduction to ufology and an overview of relevant issues, or who wants to develop critical thinking about UFO evidence, will struggle to find many better books for those purposes even 40 years later. This was the first book in which Jenny Randles used the term Oz Factor. Jenny wrote about UFO witnesses reporting, quote, a sensation of being isolated or transported from the real world into a different environmental framework, unquote. She commented that this sensation, quote, is almost suggestive of the witness being transported temporarily from our world into another where reality is similar but slightly different, a world where miracles can happen, unquote. She noted that this effect, quote, common and important, and adopted the name the Oz Factor to describe it. Of course, after the Land of Oz. The book was also part of the development of another term, UAP. Starting with her books in the early 1980s, including this one, Jenny Randles started the popularization of the term UAP as a potential replacement for the term UFO. Her book, UFO Study, in 1981, was her first book to use the term UAP. She also used the term UAP in UFO Reality in 1983. Giving reasons for preferring the term UAP, which she then used to stand for, quote-unquote, unidentified atmospheric phenomena. Her books gradually influenced other researchers. The term UAP has been infrequently used before Jenny's work, but became considerably more popular as Jenny's influence spread amongst ufologists. And the post for this over on Facebook has interesting notes from Jenny, of course, saying, quote, important to note that Paul Devereaux used the UAP term also in those days independently in his study of what in his classic book he called Earthlights. What we were both pursuing we were both pursuing the suspicion that different types of atmospheric energy phenomena might be the cause of some puzzling sightings. Why we differentiated these cases from the term UFO, which even 4 decades ago was heavily associated with the idea of alien craft, we were both working as we could with scientists and seeking to unravel the data and a more appropriate, less suggestive term, not implying a machine or intelligence behind it, seemed preferable for this subset of the data we were independently persuaded were real events, most probably involving geophysics and atmospheric physics. She goes on to say, I should add, too, that I do not subscribe to the idea that who came up with it first even matters, or that anyone since has falsely claimed credit for doing that. Indeed, Paul and I used it similarly, but not identically, though, both in a quite different way to the UAP now being defined by U.S. military. In my case, the A stood for atmospheric, as I believed that these were transient atmospheric plasmas, not the A for aerial as more modern UAP define, or now it's being anomalous, used by the government, which actually I think is good. In this field, there are limited ways you can describe what is happening, and its basic form is known from the start, and so UAP having several different definitions using different words applied to the middle letter shows that just by chance, similar terms can easily be independently created. And she goes on to say, like all science, ideas morph through time and concepts merge into a collective of knowledge and then find their true form by more data and trial and error. Thus, new takes on old ideas from the modern minds build on the footsteps of the past. It is heartening that this process occurred in ufology, as it gives an indication that, to some extent, our research was a form of science, which is what some of us were hoping to make it become. So, one last thing on the arena of possible alien life and what people think of as UFOs, then that is this pretty provocative headline over at the Jerusalem Post, and I've seen it in a couple of different other locations. Life on Mars was discovered 50 years ago and then eradicated, says astrobiologist. Astrobiology professor suggests 1970s NASA mission might have detected and unintentionally extinguished life on Mars. And this article talks about these different tests that were done to try to determine whether there was any kind of microbial life, and initial tests did seem to indicate that there were, but then they no longer found evidence of that. Article says the experiments, nevertheless, a series of experiments yielded perplexing outcomes that confounded scientists. The landers conducted 3 distinct experiments. The first produced affirmative results hinting at metabolic processes. However, the adverse effects of the subsequent 2 experiments, which failed to detect organic substances, led researchers to speculate that the initial positive result might have been due to non-biological chemical reactions. In simpler terms, the first experiment detected traces of organic materials combined with chlorine, likely contaminants inadvertently transported from Earth. Whoops. Another aspect of the experiment involved introducing water infused with nutrients and radioactive carbon, carbon-14, to the Martian soil. The hypothesis was that potential microorganisms on Mars would consume the nutrients and release radioactive carbon as a gas. Although the initial experiment indicated this radioactive gas's emission, absent in a control experiment, the remaining results remained inconclusive. According to an explanation on the scientific platform IFL Science, you figure out what the IFL stands for, the presence of bacteria should have resulted in increased gas production with additional nutrient injections and prolonged incubation. However, successive injections failed to trigger more gas emissions. The likely culprit for the initial positive reading was perchlorate, a compound utilized in rocket fuel, which could have had altered nutrient processing. The other theory is from Professor Dirk Schultz-McCoke, an authority on planetary habitation and astrobiology at the Technical University of Berlin, who posits that including water in the experiment might have been an oversight, potentially leading to the demise of the very bacteria being sought. In a June publication in Big Think magazine, he cites Earth-based life thriving in extreme environments, such as bacteria within salt rocks that draw moisture from the air. Submerging these bacteria in water could prove fatal, potentially explaining the absence of radioactive gas detection despite additional nutrient injections. And there's more over there at the jpost.com. Well, that is going to do it. That's a quick wrap up for today. I hope you've enjoyed the ride, and if like and subscribe and all that good stuff, please share the links to the show and to the Anomaly Archives with friends, family, and anybody who listen. Oh, no. Don't go knocking on doors. Don't bother people. But, if you think somebody's interested, maybe they will be. Well, thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you again very, very soon. Take care and good night.